I'm Marilyn Priel with The Better Part. We're going to hear about the experience and treatments of post-traumatic stress disorder. We will learn what is being done locally to help those who suffer with it. And we invite you to join us.
Welcome to The Better Part, a program that encompasses a diverse spectrum of topics important to our community, which we hope will both inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy the program.
Our guest is Romie Bassetto, Vietnam veteran and commander of American Legion Post 105 in Redwood City. He grew up in the California Bay Area and had an organization that was called Show Ring Production. Welcome, and I'm so happy that you're here today to tell us
I'm happy to be here
about your experiences, and tell us just briefly about your Show Ring Productions company.
It was a company that was started in 1974, and we've produced special events, and we've done coming outs for IPOs and things like that, and storefront promotions and anything in large gatherings and things like that.
So you're definitely an organizer.
Yeah, I would think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you were drafted into the military in 1965 when the Vietnam War was going, and I believe you had just completed high school. Is that true?
Well, actually, I graduated in '65 from Sarah High School, and I was drafted in 1967.
Oh,
okay. And I went to the Oakland Army Center. That's where they brought all the draftees in this area. And at the time, we thought we were going to all go to Fort Ord, be home on the weekends, and just have a good time. But because of the events that were going on at the time and the political climate and all, they sent us to Fort Polk, Louisiana. And there was 400 of us, I'll never forget it, sitting in a room going, where is Fort Polk, Louisiana? And it turns out it was the infantry center for Vietnam. And so they boxed us up and shipped us to Fort Polk, Louisiana. And it's in the middle of nowhere. So anyway, but that's what happened.
And then you had all your basic training there then?
Yeah. Well, actually, I had basic training there. I had a secondary MOS, Military Operational Service position. And then from there, they shipped me to Fort Sill, Oklahoma to learn about armor, tanks. And so actually, I was checked out in tanks and all prior to going to Vietnam. And so
so you were then deployed then soon after to Vietnam, and
Yeah.
then what area were you sent to?
I was down in Mekong Delta. Originally, when we pulled, we were going to fly into Tan Son Nhut in a 707, and it was under attack when we were coming in, so they shipped us to a place called Cam Ranh Bay. Well, Cam Ranh Bay is like the Riviera of Vietnam. And when I got out, and I said, the guy could handle this, the white sandy beaches, you heard no gunshots, no nothing, and it was just a beautiful place, it really was. But only to find out we're getting shipped south to the Delta, and that's exactly what happened. So,
and that was, the war was raging then down there.
Yeah, Tet Offensive and what have you. It was a major events going on in Vietnam at the time.
And you were with the tanks?
Yeah, no. This is the interesting thing about it, is when my orders got switched and they were going to send me to the Delta, and I will never forget the personnel sergeant. He goes, "Boy, where you're going, there is no tanks." And I said, "That's good enough for me because I don't want to be involved with them." So it turns out I got claustrophobia, and I hated being inside those things. So I left that behind. They spent all the money training me. And I ended up in an infantry outfit. So, and on the Delta, I was first assigned to Bearcat, and then we went down to we moved the whole division down to Benoit, and the 9th set up the whole operation, which encompassed about 56,000 troops. Yeah.
What had you felt about the war? Of course, you were young,
Yeah.
but did you have feelings when you were drafted were you fearful to go? I mean, of course, everyone's fearful to go.
Right.
It's human nature.
You got to remember, my first draft notice I got a little after my 18th birthday. I was actually in the Army, and I was in Vietnam when I was 20 years old, handling weapons. And when you first get there, I mean, you're confused. You don't know what's really going on. You think you know what's going on, but you really don't. And until you get some road miles behind you, you've been out there and got some experience, nobody even wants to deal with you because you're a brand new guy. So once you got the experience, well, then it's a different story. But anybody tells me that they've been put in harm's way, they weren't scared, that's I don't believe them. So like I said, yeah, it was an experience, and I'm 20 years old. And I've always said, when I took my first step in Vietnam, that once I shouldered that rifle, I went from a boy to a man that day. So
one who hasn't experienced it can only try to imagine what it's like, you know, in the battles, all the noises and the smells and everything that go on in there. But what we if we haven't been through it, we can't. What we see in the movies, it's not what it is.
no.
But I can see how it's just horrifying for young kids. And sometimes I think about, too, the ones who are repeaters, who have back-to-back tours of duty. You know, it's just years of putting up with this. Now, tell me about the post-traumatic stress disorder. What are the symptoms?
Well, in my particular case, each person I would feel be a little different about it. I was getting, well, I still occasionally get them after how many years, flashbacks of situations that I was in, and experienced things like that in the form of nightmares and what have you. But when I first got back, I didn't tell anybody about it because I was ashamed of the fact that I got that. I was ashamed of the fact that I was in a uniform. Remember, this is 1969.
That's right.
And so when I first got back home, it was within hours. I took my uniform off. My father picked me up, never saw me in my uniform. And he says, "Where's your uniform, son?" I said, "Don't you dare tell anybody I was in Vietnam." And so I kept it quiet for over 30 years. And I remember one day, I had some anger management issues. I had a lot of recurring nightmares and things like that. The first 3 years, I slept with a pistol underneath my pillow because I felt comfortable by doing something like that. And you know, this is kind of not normal behavior. Didn't interact with people that weren't in the group. So anyway, I had saying, well, maybe I got a problem, but I didn't act on it.
Had you heard about PTS
No.
before? It wasn't.
No.
It wasn't something that only recently have I heard about it in the past couple
Absolutely.
of years.
Yeah, and when we got home, basically, I complained about my hearing when we got home, and I never forget. I went to the VA. A doctor smacked the table. I turned around and he says, "There's nothing wrong with your hearing." He signed it off. So my first set of hearing aids, the VA's taking care of that for me now. But my first set of hearing aids, I paid for them because I wanted to hear. The interesting part of it is when I finally went to the VA, years and years and years later, I remember a counselor saying, when I walked in, she said, "Why'd you wait 35 years to come here?" And I said, "I don't know." And she says, "You're a piece of cake." Because she says that you've saved everything. For some reason, I saved all the documentation from Vietnam, and it sat there for 35 years. When I brought everything in, it's like the doors opened for me.
Now, when you first came back, though, you were having these symptoms.
Yeah.
The nightmares
Yeah.
but you didn't know what it was.
No.
But how did it affect your work and your relationships?
I was working 6-7 days a week for over 30 years. I buried it. I suppressed it. My way I got along with people, didn't let them get close to me. because I might lose them. So if, I don't want to go through that.
She means like you lost buddies during
right.
the war and that sort of thing.
And so I wasn't proud of being there. I was. If I got in a relationship, you stand in the corner, don't get close to me. And of course, I thought this is normal behavior. And when
Had you seen anything like that when you were over there? Did you see other soldiers who had maybe had these symptoms that you know now, maybe had it during their service?
Yeah, there's no question in my mind. Was a lot of, Marilyn, there was something that I was thinking about when we were getting ready to sit down here, is the fact that a lot of the guys, it's an interesting thing about PTSD or that kind of thing. You don't know what'll turn a person's mind. What I'm saying is that I've seen situations in Vietnam that I just figured I can go through it, and I've seen other guys crack under that stress and lose it.
Because everybody relates differently from their past experiences.
Absolutely, and you're right on the money there. And so consequently, at what point? And so then I'm saying, well, wait a minute, I made it through that. I saw that, and I'm okay. Well, it turns out later on, after several years being with the vet center, that it wasn't all right, and I had to work on it. So, which I have. So,
did it ever cause you to lose a job or anything?
No, not really. I seem, and I've made my way a lot on my own personal businesses, and I've started several different businesses and what have you. So, now no, it didn't affect me in that respect a lot, because I kind of kept a lot of that to myself. And one of the jobs I had, I remember sitting down with a fellow. I didn't know he was in the military, and he didn't know I was in the military. And he was telling me about a platoon, and I said, wait a minute, where were you? It turns out he was in an operational area not very far from where I was in the Delta, and he lost several guys in a platoon, and this is the reason for his behavior at work and what have you. Then I told him my experiences, and I says, hey, we're the same guys. And I didn't realize at the time, maybe I should start looking into some kind of help for myself and see what's going on. The way I used to cover it is just keep working, keep involved, and didn't have time to think about it. My understanding, after it's been explained to me, is what our premise is with the counseling and all that I've had is let's go forward. It's not going to change what happened in the past, but let's go forward. Let's identify it. Let's talk about it, and then let's move forward. And that's what we're doing.
You decided to go to, I guess, psychologist or psychiatrist. Yeah. And it took 5 attempts that you go up to the door.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Okay. A veteran came up to me. He recognized issues with me that I didn't recognize about myself. He was a Marine. I'll never forget this guy. And he says, think about getting some help. It turns out he was in a PTSD program already. I didn't know until later. And he was on me. It was like a year. And finally he says, here's the number you have to call. Here's who you have to talk to. Go down there. And I went down there 5 or 6 times. And I finally told the counselor once I got involved, how come that door weighs 4 tons? Because nobody can move it. And that's a true story. And I finally went through the door. Once I got into the door, I remember a veteran coming up and saying, we want you to stay here and talk to a counselor. And I waited about 30 minutes, and I said, hey, they're busy. I'm going. I'm out of here. And he said, oh, no, you're staying here. You're going to talk to Sheila. And so the bottom line is that that's how the whole program got started. Yeah, it was because you're in denial. You're in denial that you have any problems. And that's one of the things I talk to with younger vets that I've met, that it's the same story. It's just that it's several years later, as far as the fellows being in a combat situation. And I remember when they offered me in Vietnam in 1969 $10,000 to re-up for one more year, one more tour. And I said, you don't have enough money in the federal government for me to come back to this. I can't imagine the guys have been back 2, 3, and 4 times. I know one of my friends that's been back to Afghanistan 4 times. That you want to talk about issues, and it's sad.
Mm-hmm. Well, I keep thinking about this kid who, the recent thing that was in, Time magazine about Matthew Magzus, who he had been in the reserves, and then he's in the military. He came back. He had a wife and a little tiny toddler, and she was pregnant, and he was not getting any help through the VA. He said he would go in, and they would talk about, they'd make him relive certain experiences, but he said he would just always go in and talk about the same thing. Well, we all know what happened, that he ended up killing the whole family and himself. And he's such a patriotic kid, when he went in, and so, a city hero when he went in, and the whole town was cheering him on, and he's so happy. And then this terrible thing happened, and it was a normal, happy kid. So it can happen to anybody. It's not a weakness or anything else. It's what they experience. And I was wondering something, too, about, because I think what it's like in high schools and middle schools, and there's a lot of peer pressure and groups and bullies and everything else. Does anything like that happen when you're in the military and in a combat thing? Is there a lot of that going on that affects people and how they react?
You've got to remember that situation is a situation that, unless you've been involved, you have no idea what it's all about. Mm-hmm. And as far as supporting each other, if you don't, it could cost you your life. Mm-hmm. So it's not a question, do you like or dislike or whatever the person along, he better support you, because he's going to and vice versa, because you're not going to live. It's that simple. And I will tell you one thing, because I was on altogether, I think, 238 operations. And when you get out, and you get out of the berm, we used to call it, or out of the main compound.
Fire.
Yeah, and if you get out of there, you better be dependent on each other. Matter of fact, the guy that was my gunner, we're still friends today, 40-something years later, and we call each other. He lives in Texas, and I guess we're going to be lifelong friends, because I depended on him and he depended on me. So because of that, we got through it, and I think that no, it wasn't, in my experiences, there wasn't any of that kind of, not if you were in a field operation and you're out there. I mean, it was all about taking care of each other and coming home alive. And there was no politics involved. It was, we want to get home alive. And that's the whole thing. Forget what the cause was, the purpose of the war and all. Not us. We wanted to get home alive. That's all we were interested in doing. So, yeah.
You founded something in Redwood City. It's called the Redwood City Veterans Center.
Right.
And you also were responsible for starting up a post-traumatic stress syndrome group.
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, I'm part of the group. I didn't start it up. Oh. The counselor put it together, and there's about 14 of us in the group now. And basically, when the group gets started, they talk about their experiences and what have you. And most of the Iraq, Afghanistan, that's what would happen with them, getting a group together. But then after that, you start transitioning. You start learning how to transition. You start learning how to interact with people other than veterans, other than your own kind. And that's the purpose of putting the group together. First, you go into individual counseling, and then if you want, it took my counselor, I don't know, 3-4 months to say, would you consider going into a group? I mean, I says, I'm here talking to you. I says, I don't think it's necessary to be talking in front of the guys and tell a bunch of stories. Well, then I walked in, and after a few sessions, I said, wait a minute, this is helping me out, because we're finding out the same issues about PTSD are prevalent with all the guys in the groups. We've got guys in the group that their issues that they still haven't surfaced, and we know their issues. They've admitted there is issues, and it still hasn't come onto the table. But one of the best ones that I heard, I had a friend of mine that he put himself out in the wilderness for about 2 years. He was married. He's been married to his wife almost 40 years, and finally one day he says, "I want to come home." So he came home, and it turns out that I didn't know Danny'd been to Vietnam, and what he did was the wife put herself in a PTSD group to understand what was wrong with her husband. A lot of women have done that,
yes.
because the husband doesn't see the obvious. So instantly, the positive side of the story, he's getting himself some help, and
So you're still in a group then?
Yeah.
You go once a week or
Yeah.
once a month?
Once a week.
How many people are usually in?
Anywhere from 8 to 13.
And I guess the newcomers, it must be a little like AA. The new people come in and they just sit there and listen, or there's some eager to talk about it? Or?
Well, when they first come in, they're overwhelmed because they see these guys in the room, and then when they start hearing the general conversation, the next thing you know, they start chiming in with their thoughts and opinions and ideas. And also, you got to remember, if they're brand new, when they're coming into the group, it's some of the stories we've already gone through, but we've always respected the new guys, and we listen to the whole situation on what's happened to them.
It must be helpful for the Afghani boys coming in and the Iraqi people, not just boys, they're probably women too.
Yeah.
But trying to glean your experience and so forth, what you dealt with for 35 years before you finally recognized that you needed to do something. You couldn't fight it out on your own, I guess.
Yeah, the one that's one of the reasons I feel that this is our meeting so important, is the fact that that's who we want to. I'd like to see us get to, is the fellows that are just, and the women that are still coming back, just coming back. I think it's so important that they get help immediately to start dealing with the issues of what they've just experienced, the traumatic experiences that they've just gone through. And I think the healing process would be accelerated if they get the help immediately and seek it out. So it's really important. You made a good point.
Are there any other groups around who are helping them aside from the place where you are?
Yeah, there's several groups, and I guess within the organization, the American Legion, which I'm obviously...
You're the commander.
Yeah, I'm the commander. As their role is also supporting, for example, when there's a veteran like you were just saying that wasn't getting help and all, is kind of be the mentor to go through the system and get some answers for him. One of the problems with the veteran coming back, he's confused, he's home, he doesn't know who he can talk to, who he can tell his stories to, or what have you. He doesn't know where to go, really. And if he tries to go through the maze of bureaucratic systems within the federal government for the Veterans Administration, forget it. He has to have help. He has to have a good counselor. He has to have an advocate that will sit there and help him. And that's one thing the American Legion will do. American Legion supported me when I went through the whole system. So, matter of fact, they picked up my file. It sat on somebody's desk for 3.5 years. And they picked up my file and gave me a phone call, and they said, because you're a member of the American Legion, can we take over as a power of attorney and handle your case? I said, yeah, sure, have at it. And they got me answers in a hurry. So
people who have PTSD, they have case like say someone who was blinded in the war or crippled or something. You have case numbers too for your malady or your disorder.
Absolutely. And then I got a couple health issues that are directed by from Vietnam. I'm diabetic. I got a lung problem, and I don't know if you realize it or not, or if you heard, that when they were dropping that Agent Orange stuff and they were using it, they put 22 million gallons of it out there, and so very few guys that were in the field running around weren't affected with that kind of stuff. And in my family, I'm the only guy that has diabetes. So it's not even a family thing.
If you were talking to some young people out watching this program,
Sure.
young veterans or old veterans,
Right.
what would you say to them if if they're having a problem and they're scared to come in? What would you say to them?
I would say that you have to consider your issues and problems that you have. You have to look at your family, see what you are or aren't doing with your family. There's a reason you're doing what you're doing with your family, and then seek out the help. And like I said, there's Viet Nam Veterans of America, there's the American Legion, there's Veterans of Foreign War. There's a lot of organizations that can come in and help you. Go there and ask them for help. And another thing, if there's wives of veterans that are watching this program, there's no reason you can't make the step one and go in and talk to a counselor and tell them what's going on and see if you can seek some help for yourself personally to start out with.
First, they have to realize that they do have a disorder,
Right.
that they can't fight it, and they can't John Wayne it out because there's no script for that.
Exactly.
I see these homeless, a lot of these homeless guys, and I know that some are mentally ill people who have just been turned out. But I think there might be a lot of veterans with PTSD that couldn't cope with jobs and people. Do
Yeah.
you think that's the case?
Yeah, and one of the issues, they have a thing called a stand down, and they do that, I believe, maybe twice a year. And what they do is it's a 4-day program, and the people that are maybe homeless or even not necessarily homeless want to try to seek out help. The Veterans Administration puts together a group. I think this last time they did it, they had almost 450 vets show up. And they set up an actual camp at a fairgrounds. And what they do is they go through and outline all the benefits you're entitled to for as being a veteran. And they basically they have you enroll in the program. You have to maintain on the ground for 4 days, and they got counselors, doctors, they got everything there to direct you in the right direction. And so I think that's a helpful program. And we've had 2 stand downs in our post ourselves, matter of fact, where the veteran just walk in, doesn't know anything about the programs and what's available, and it's all there.
Well, thank you for all that you're doing for these boys. And I'm not your mother, but I'm proud of you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.